Well, folks, the Supreme Court just backstabbed President Trump, not in the middle of the day, not even after a full hearing, but in the dead of night while most of America was asleep. And now we're all paying the price. In fact, this wasn't just some legal technicality. This was a full-blown judicial ambush. This was designed to block Trump's lawful attempt to deport violent cartel-linked illegal immigrants. And the worst part, guys, they didn't even let him speak. There's no hearing, no defense, just a hammer drop. Justice Alito, one of the few left standing for the rule of law, torched his colleagues in a midnight dissent that could go down as one of the most scathing rebukes in modern Supreme Court history, guys. So what he revealed about the court's real motives, it's going to shock you. In fact, get this, guys. Criminals that Trump tried to deport, they're still here. Some of these criminals, they're tied to cartels. They're protected by our own Supreme Court. So why is this happening? Like, why now? And what does this mean for your safety and for the future of the America First movement? Stick around, guys, because in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to share with you guys some explosive details and truth behind this decision. What Alito really said at that 1 a.m. dissent, how this ruling could put every American in danger, and more importantly, why millions of frustrated voters are now demanding action. Guys, this is not just a legal story. This is betrayal of the American people. And trust me, when you hear what the media isn't telling you, you're going to be pissed off and furious too. By the way, guys, if you're just now joining the live, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate you guys. If you appreciate informative, detailed breakdowns like this, you will love the channel. Right now, the Supreme Court, it's functioning like a neutral body interpreting the Constitution, and it's behaving like a politically fractured battleground. And the target of that internal war, it's none other than President Donald J. Trump. Justice Samuel Alito, one of the few justices that are left with the spine to actually speak the truth, he didn't just dissent from the major opinion. He went nuclear. He accused his fellow justices of torching the court's credibility. This is crazy. This is history in the making, guys. He accused them of abandoning due process and acting with blatant political bias in the middle of the night. Now, let me repeat that, guys. This wasn't a ruling at 2 p.m. in the afternoon with arguments from the defense and from the prosecution. This was a secretive 1 a.m. decision rushed through with no public explanation, no oral arguments, no emergency condition that justified that kind of reckless urgency. And do you know what sparked this midnight meltdown? President Trump tried to do something that every American president has had the right to do since 1798, which is deport foreign nationals who may pose a national threat. Using the Alien Enemies Act, President Trump moved to deport violent illegal criminals, immigrants, including individuals tied to a notorious Venezuelan cartel. These aren't some dreamers. These aren't families seeking asylum. These are suspected cartel operatives with gang affiliations, some of whom have criminal records. They're now living freely within U.S. soil. And so what did the Supreme Court do? Well, they jumped in at 1 a.m. in the morning to protect them. They didn't say, hey, let's hear the facts. They didn't say, let's weigh the Constitution. They simply just dropped the gavel and told Trump, look, you're done. So let me make this crystal clear, guys. The same Supreme Court that sat back and said nothing for years while our southern border was getting flooded with tens of millions of illegal immigrants suddenly found the energy at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning to leap into action the moment Trump tried to stop the flow. And it gets worse. Justice Alito said that there was no factual justification for the court's order. There was no imminent threat. There was no urgent deportation that couldn't wait till the morning. So why act at midnight? Anybody on the live right now have any guesses as to why they decided to do this at midnight? Anyone? Because it was never about the law. It was about sabotaging Trump. And if this can happen to a sitting president, well, what hope does the average citizen have? Now, we need to get into what this means for your safety, how national security is now at risk, and what Justice Alito's full dissent reveals. But before we get to this, guys, I want you to ask yourself this. Why would the Supreme Court go out of its way to block the deportation efforts of violent foreign nationals and do it in total darkness? Well, stick with me, guys, because we're about to dive deep into Alito's explosive dissent, word for word, and expose how this ruling doesn't just hurt Trump, but it endangers you. But let's get into what Justice Alito actually said, because his midnight dissent wasn't just a critique. It was a warning to every American. He wrote that the Supreme Court handed down unprecedented and legally questionable relief without hearing from the other side, without facts, and without explanation. He called it a disgrace, not just to legal process, but to the very legitimacy of the court itself. And so here's a line that should set off all sorts of alarm bells everywhere. He said, and I quote, "I refuse to join the court's order because we had no good reason to think that issuing an order at midnight was necessary or appropriate," end quote. Guys, let that settle in. This wasn't an emergency. No one's rights were being violated. There was no imminent deportation happening at 1 a.m. So what did the Supreme Court do? They didn't just ignore Trump's legal right to act. They stripped away President Trump's ability to protect the country using the exact authority that the Constitution provides during times of national threat. Should the Supreme Court have more power than President Trump, than the President of the United States? But let's talk about this threat here, because this isn't theoretical. This decision stopped the removal of foreign nationals tied to Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan terrorist cartel known for brutality, extortion, drug trafficking, and human smuggling. Now, you're not talking about undocumented workers looking for construction jobs. We're not talking about violent gang operatives slipping through our southern border. And the Supreme Court just put out a welcome mat. Guys, national security is a buzzword. It's real. And thanks to this ruling, our enemies are laughing at us. But here's what we know. We know that criminals who should have been deported are still here. We know that the courts are treating them with more care than the president elected by 75 million Americans. And your safety? Well, apparently that's not a part of the legal equation anymore. And it's not just the court that's out of touch, guys. In just a minute, I'm going to show you guys how CNN's own polling proves the American people stand with Trump, not with this court. We're also going to talk about why the justices ignored that public will and what really benefits from shielding these violent illegals. Now, first off, I need to ask you guys, if the court can hand down rulings just like this in the middle of the night, if the president of the United States can be denied the right to defend his actions, what's next, right? Because folks, if you think this ruling was about protecting due process, wait till you see how many times the left abandoned that same principle when it suited them. Now, stick with me, guys, because we need to dive into the massive disconnect between the Supreme Court and the American people, and how this ruling crosses the line into judicial overreach like we've never seen before. Now, here's what gets even more outrageous, because, while the justices were handing down this midnight betrayal, do you know what the American people were saying? According to CNN's own poll, and you're going to want to sit down for this, guys, 56% of Americans support President Trump's plan to deport all illegal immigrants. That's not just a majority. That is a tidal wave of public opinion. And let me be crystal clear with you guys. That's not a fringe poll from some conservative outlet. That's CNN, the network that spent years attacking Trump and shielding this very court. And guess what? The will of the people did not matter. The Supreme Court completely ignored it. They buried it. And the political elite, they pretended like it didn't exist. And so what does this tell you? I think it tells you that this isn't just a legal fight. This is a war over power. The court didn't just rule against President Trump. It ruled against 56% of Americans who want their communities to be safe, their streets to be protected, their laws to be enforced. And so this brings us to the next truth bomb. The Supreme Court decision was not justice. It was judicial overreach at the highest level. The same court that's supposed to interpret the Constitution, they're now playing a dual role: part-time activist, full-time Trump obstructionist. They didn't protect the Constitution. They rewrote it in the dead of night. And the target? A president who dared to defend the borders that they failed to protect. Well, let me ask you this, guys. Where was this urgency when 20 million illegal immigrants crossed the border under Joe Biden? Where was the court when cities were being overwhelmed? Where was their concern for law and order then? And now suddenly, all of a sudden, they care about timing. Now they're worried about procedure. Give me a break. This isn't legal fidelity. This is selective justice. And you know what makes this even worse? The very same people that are screaming about due process for violent illegal immigrants, they're the ones who ignored due process every time that they went after Trump. They ignored it during the fake Russia hoax. They ignored it during the impeachment. They ignored it when they censored the truth. Now they want us to slow down and wait? Folks, I got news for the progressive elites and their allies in the black robes. The American people, they see right through the charade, and we're not going anywhere. Now stick with me, guys, because we need to really expose how the Alien Enemies Act is being weaponized against Trump, and we need to break down the blistering hypocrisy of the same leaders who sat completely silent while our country was being overrun by illegals coming across the border. Now, this story is not cooling down. In fact, it's about to hit a boiling point. People are mad. So let's talk about this Alien Enemies Act, the law at the center of the storm here. So basically, this law, it's been on the books since 1798. It didn't just get added. It's been there. This is not a typo, guys. 1798. It's older than most of our modern government. And it's not some obscure rule that's collecting dust. It's been used by multiple presidents, both Democrats and Republican presidents in the past. Why? Because it gives the commander-in-chief the power to remove foreign nationals who pose a threat during times of national danger. So when President Trump invoked this particular law to deport violent cartel-linked illegals, that was his constitutional right to do so. It was his duty. But all of a sudden, because it's Trump using this particular law, now all of a sudden this law doesn't count. Oh, now it's controversial. Now it's unconstitutional. Now the court steps in at 1 a.m. to block this thing. Folks, that's not law. That's sabotage. Let me ask you this, though. If Joe Biden used the same act tomorrow to deport pro-Trump foreign nationals, do you think the Supreme Court will be rushing in to stop him? Of course not. They will be applauding it as a bold leadership decision. This is what we mean when we talk about selective enforcement, double standards, two-tiered justice systems, etc. When the rules only apply to conservatives and never to the globalist elite. Speaking of hypocrisy, guys, get ready for the next level. Because while the court slaps President Trump down for trying to fix the border crisis, let me remind you who caused the crisis to begin with. It was the Democrats. It was the Biden administration. It was the same media news outlets that are now screaming for due process. They are the ones who refuse to enforce federal immigration law. They are the ones who waved in 20 million illegal immigrants with open arms. They are the ones who choked border agents with red tape. Well, now they want to slow down the process of sending violent criminals back. Give me a break, guys. Where was their concern for due process when American families were getting destroyed by fentanyl, crime, and human trafficking? Where was their love for law and order then? Well, folks, let's be real. They broke the system, and now Trump's just trying to fix it. And of course, the court is trying to stop him from fixing it. But we're not done. We need to talk about something that's probably very controversial to say out loud, so I hope I don't offend too many people, but it really needs to be said. Do illegal immigrants deserve due process after breaking into this country? Now, guys, of course, if we keep playing by their rules, we're going to lose our country. Does anyone disagree with me on that one? But let's talk about the big old elephant in the room here, because this is the part that nobody on CNN or MSNBC, or I should say MSDNC, or even Fox would even say out loud. Do people who enter this country illegally deserve full due process? Because here's the reality. When somebody breaks into your home, they don't get to demand a jury trial before you call the cops or before you draw your weapon. They don't get to file a motion before you kick them out of your house. So why are we treating our country any differently, right? These individuals, and we're not talking about peaceful families, we're talking about gang members, repeat offenders, and in some cases, foreign nationals with known cartel ties. They chose to enter this country illegally. That is the moment that they rejected our laws. They rejected our sovereignty, and they rejected our due process. So why are we twisting ourselves into all sorts of legal knots to protect them? Why are we giving them midnight rulings and Supreme Court sympathy? Why are American families who, lose loved ones to cartel violence being put toward the back of the bus? These folks are getting ignored. They're being called racist, and they get nothing. And that's what brings me to another question, and it's a big one. Where was the same Supreme Court when 20 million illegal immigrants poured into the country under Joe Biden? We didn't hear anything from them on that. Where was their concern for due process then? Where was their emergency ruling to protect your neighborhood, your hospital, your school? I'm going to tell you where they were. They were asleep at the wheel. They were looking the other way. The system didn't care. The border was wide open, and the court said nothing about it. And so now that President Trump is trying to clean up this mess, now all of a sudden they care about legal procedure and constitutional nuance? No. This is not about fairness. This is about punishing Trump. This is about protecting the globalist status quo. And if you think it ends there, well, think again, guys. This is just the beginning of what they're willing to do to stop the America First movement. They don't want justice. They want control. But here's what they don't get. You can bend the law. You can twist the rules. You can even try to kneecap the president in the middle of the night. But you cannot kill the will of the people. Now, of course, we got to talk about the two justices that are still fighting for the Constitution right now and why why this ruling isn't final. Guys, the battle's not over. In fact, this battle is just getting started. I know it's been heavy. We've exposed the betrayal. We've laid out the hypocrisy, and we've made it pretty clear. The system has failed us yet again. But hear me out loud and clear, guys. This is not over. Not even close. Because two justices stood tall in the middle of this disgraceful ruling. You've got Justice Samuel Alito, and you've got Justice Clarence Thomas. They didn't stay silent. They didn't play politics. They stood firm for the Constitution, for law and order, and for you. Now, their dissents weren't just legal arguments. They were a battle cry, a signal to the American people that not everybody on the bench has bowed to the pressure. Justice Alito called it out directly. This was unjustified, uncalled for, and unnecessary. And Clarence Thomas, he joined in, signaling that there's still a constitutional firewall left in that building. And here's something the media conveniently forgot to tell you. This ruling, it wasn't a final decision. It was a temporary block. It was just a hold while the case makes its way through the lower federal courts, is what they're saying. That's right, guys. This wasn't the end of the Alien Enemies Act. This wasn't a final say on President Trump's authority. This was a stall tactic. This was a legal roadblock, but it's not permanent. And that means the fight continues. So don't let anybody tell you that Trump lost. Don't let the headlines fool you. And don't for 1 second think that this is where the story ends. If anything, this is just the first shot of a new phase in this war. This is a war between activist judges and constitutionalists, between chaos and order, between those who want America to stand and those who just want her to fall. Now, we also have to lay out exactly where the America First movement goes from here, guys. Like we need to talk about the next battles, the border wall, not just the border war, but why mass deportation is still on the table. And no matter what this broken court has to say, there's a lot more that we need to talk about, because the final chapter of this story, this is one that the left will never see coming. All right. So after everything that we just talked about, that we exposed, the betrayal, the backstabbing, the midnight ruling, the shield that was thrown over violent criminals while your families get left behind, you need to understand one thing. This is far from over. The America First movement, guys, it's not backing down. Not today, not tomorrow, never. They can block a law, they can delay a case, they can silence a president in the middle of the night, but what they can't do is stop a movement of millions of Americans who are finally awake and they're done being ignored. The border, it will be secured. The law will be enforced. And yes, those who came here illegally, especially those who are linked to terror, gangs, and violence, they will be deported. It's not hatred, it's not racism, it's justice. And that's America First. That's it. Because we don't get to have a strong nation if we don't have strong laws. We don't get to protect our kids, our homes, our freedoms if the Supreme Court's playing politics while our enemies walk out free. And let me tell you something else. This movement is not about Trump alone anymore. It's about everyday, hardworking Americans who've been betrayed by the system, taxed into the ground, gaslit by the media, and the left, they're just getting away. And here's what happens next. We don't retreat. We double down. We show up at the polls. We speak the truth on every platform. We support leaders who will enforce the law, protect the border, and defend America unapologetically. And if they come for our Constitution, then we're going to have to fight a little harder, because the American people did not elect the Supreme Court. We elected President Trump, and we'll do it again. So to every patriot that's watching this right now, share this video. Drop a comment down below. Let your voice be heard. They tried to silence us at 1 a.m., but now, hey, sun's up, and the movement's just getting started. Hit the like button, subscribe. We'll see you next time.